Welcome to the Jeff Knows Inc. Entrepreneurial Podcast with your host, Jeff Lopes. Jeff has over 2 decades experience as a serial entrepreneur, building brands like Kimura from his home basement to a multi-million-dollar global brand that has sold over 250,000 pairs of boxing gloves. Jeff's here to educate, guide, and drive you on the process of bringing your ideas and dreams to reality with the inspiring stories from some of the top business minds.
Welcome to episode number 76 of the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. Super excited to host today our good friend, Steve Harris, aka Mr. Ruthless Execution. Steve is a business coach, a life coach, all-around fantastic individual, a husband, a father that currently resides in Nigeria and will be making his way back with his family to the U.S. very soon. Great conversation, everyone, today. To sit back and enjoy this conversation. We are live on the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I am your host, Jeff Lopes. I'm super excited to have on Stephen Harris. We connected through IG, Instagram, and inspirational gentleman, works as a business coach, inspirational coach, life coach. This guy has a lot of things happening, helping a lot of people. So I'm excited to have him on our podcast from another part of the globe and get to know Stephen Harris and let our audience get to know him as well. So how are you, brother?
Fantastic, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me. By the way, it's Steve, not Steven. So
Steve, I apologize, brother. I apologize.
That's okay, cool. Totally cool to be here. Totally stoked to be here. Loving your background, by the way. I know they can't see it, but I'm
we do a YouTube video as well with this.
Oh, even better.
Yeah. Perfect. So I always start off our podcast by letting our audience get to know what you're currently doing and what stage of life you are. Then we let the conversation flow. So Steve, where are you right now? Like, what are you currently doing?
First off, I'm in Nigeria. That's somewhere in Africa. Most people probably never heard about it, but we've got some great football, some really great things happening going for us. But like you mentioned, I'm a life and business strategist. And for the last, I dare say maybe 15 years, I've dedicated my life to just helping entrepreneurs, start and scale their businesses. Even though I have clientele from across the world, I'm primarily focused on the Nigerian economy because Nigerians are hustlers. We're natural born entrepreneurs. You know what I mean? Yeah. We're always looking for opportunity to see how we can make a difference. We're really hardworking people, despite what some media might think, but we're really hardworking, amazing people. So a lot of us are playing it by ear. You know what I mean? We just have this great idea. We're just playing it by ear. So for me, it was very important because about 16 years ago or so, I was working as a management consultant, helping big organizations, multinationals, just, dominate their industries. And after a while, I realized that a lot of smaller businesses needed a lot of help. So, the SME economy needed a lot of help. There were people who were going out with passion, but they didn't understand the business. And of course, they'd lose money, get jaded, get disoriented, go out of business, go start again. I felt it was like part of my purpose, part of my calling, to see how I could help as many businesses as I could start, scale, and grow. So quite recently, I got on a quest to help over 200 entrepreneurs scale their businesses. And it may seem like a small amount of money in terms of currency, because I do know that there's a discrepancy between our currency and the dollar or whatever. But those 200 entrepreneurs, working with them, they were able to generate about $1.5, $1.7 million from their businesses cumulatively. Now that may not be a lot in, where you are around the world, but trust me, right here, it's a big deal. And there was nothing more fulfilling just seeing how, just from their giftings, from their talents, from their abilities, how they could just master the business of their talents.
Could you give me an idea of just, when you talk about businesses, give an idea of some of the actual businesses so people could understand. I think I understand where you're going with it, but is it mom and pop shops? Like, give me an idea of who you're working with. Yeah,
pretty much. So most of them are solopreneurs. You know what I mean? Solo entrepreneurs, just mom and pop shops, makeup artists, business developments, real estate here and there, but usually very smaller size type businesses. You know what I mean? They probably have 2 to 3 staff, and they're just trying to see how they can make it work. But yeah, it's been a very fulfilling journey, and I'm totally loving it.
Yeah, I love that. I've one thing about me, and we talked about this before we went on air. I'm focused on a lot of my business coaching now, and I've really just ramped that up. But for the last 3 years, I've dedicated myself to 64 young entrepreneurs. I've never charged a penny, and it's more just from the ground up. I wanted to see them develop. I've done well for myself. I wanted to give back, and I've taken over, like I said, 64, and it's amazing seeing how much they actually listen and develop and grow. And it's so inspiring seeing them, right? So it's almost the next generation. So I love that aspect of you. So when you started this journey, like you said, you worked for a big corporation and you saw the need in the niche market of obviously smaller people struggling. When you started, who was your first client? Like, how did it actually just start when you actually began the whole process?
Great question. So when I left my organization, for me, it was the worst time ever. You know what I mean? Because
how many years ago was this? Sorry, I'm asking.
So I started my organization at about, let's see. I left my previous employment in 2010. Okay. So that's 10 years. 10 years right now. Right. And at the time I left, it was perhaps the worst part for me ever because my wife is pregnant, which is amazing. So we have a 9-year-old, which is fantastic. But at the time I left, we didn't have a lot of money. We were really bootstrapping, you know what I mean? And so there she is, pregnant. I've left my job, barely have enough to go on. And I'm sitting down and I'm like, Lord, help me. How do I take care of my family? Because I've got a lot of responsibilities. It wasn't like I couldn't go get a job, but I'd worked for so long, for about 5-6 years, and I just wanted to do something different. And so for me, to be honest, I literally sat down and became very introspective and asked the question, what do I carry? What are my gifts? What are my talents? What are my abilities? Because I do recognize that everyone's got something. You got something that can work for you. You just got to be able to find the business out of it. So I took my consulting knowledge, recognizing that I had, I've been doing this for at that time about 5-6 years. And like I always say, it's not what you don't have that limits you. It's what you have, what you don't know how to use. So sitting down, becoming a lot more introspective. And to be honest, so at the time when I started bootstrapping, didn't have an office, didn't have nothing. So I was operating from my living room. So technically from work, just sitting down on the couch, with my computer and just putting out proposals and just trying to see how I can make a difference. And no one was buying, no one was interested in purchasing. But luckily enough, and for me, it was my wife's delivery day was getting closer, rent was getting closer. I was a bundle of nerves. But luckily, what just happened was I got a phone call from a client who, at the time, I'd done some work for her bank, and she was one of the participants. She was a banker then. She calls me. She says, "Well, Steve, just a quick one. A friend of mine runs this travel agency, and she's looking for someone who's fantastic at customer service. And I remember that you had a customer service class for us back in the day. Would you be available?" I'm like, "I'm available like right now. Just give her my number." You know what I mean? So she gives me a call, and that puts some money on the table. You know what I mean? That puts some, food on the table, money in the bank. And we started from there. So I started proving my concept from there, and slowly but surely got a lot of referrals. Then my brand became a lot more visible, and the rest, they say, is history.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So with your life purpose and your life coaching, and I saw you're very certified. When did that journey all start?
Man, for me, I think I'd always wanted to be a coach. I'd always wanted to be a consultant. I remember back in the day when I was in college, I had read this amazing, I think it was an amazing book by Tom Peters. I think it was Tom Peters or something like that. And I'm hoping I'm not mistaking the book, but there was a case study done on a particular on a particular organization that they wanted to scale. So they were making sardines or something like that, and they were trying to compete in this market. And the underdogs were making white sardines, and the monopoly had pink sardines. And so they hired this consultant to come in to work on their business. The consultant looked at the model. There was nothing wrong with the business model. Looked at the program. Nothing. The product by itself was great, but the marketing sucked. And so he sat down and he came up with 5 words, Jeff, that for me blew my mind. And it just totally changed the game for this sardine company. And the 5 words were guaranteed not to turn pink.
I love it.
Oh my goodness. So as you can imagine, people started thinking maybe there was something wrong with Pink Sardine. Maybe it went off a little bit, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And of course, their businesses, skyrocketed. And for me, I was like, I want to do this. I want to be able to help, just with little things. Just how do you turn somebody's business around with just the power of ingenuity, the power of your thought? So of course, I needed to learn. I got into consulting for a couple of years, got it certified. Then I realized that beyond just helping organizations through consulting, I recognized that the people needed coaching. Yeah. So even though the organization was doing great, the people themselves needed coaching. They needed help. They needed to be motivated. They needed to be inspired. They were just, going through the motions. Yeah. And I'm really big on personal development. I'm really big on motivation, inspiration. And, in my sessions, I just inspire them. And they leave like, oh my God, I can take on the world. And for me, I just got a kick, so to speak, out of inspiring people to be better. And I'm like, I could do this forever. You know what I mean? I could literally do this forever and just see the light bulbs come on in their eyes where before there was darkness. Now you've ignited something. Might be a flicker, but
let me dive in that. If you
tell me,
because with a lot of individuals, and I see that, and I think a lot of coaches see that, as a coach, you're a natural entrepreneur. That's obvious. And you could see, I always say with the natural entrepreneurs, they have that extra drive, that extra gear, that extra work ethic. When you're dealing with going to a bigger company, you're dealing with employees, you're trying to motivate them, stuff like that. When you leave that door, that flicker changes a lot of times, right? It becomes a routine. Right. Like everybody's life is very routine, and they build these routines and these habits are very hard to break.
Right.
How do you find ways of breaking it over the long haul?
That's a really good question, and I think that's where the power of coaching comes in. And to be honest, you can't help somebody who's hell bent on drowning. I don't know if you know what I mean.
Yeah, 100%.
Someone, in order for someone to get help, they've got to come to that place where they recognize, I need a bit of help. Mm-hmm. I need to be able to take this forward. So yes, motivation is great; it gets you started, but coaching is what keeps the habits going. Yeah. And it literally changes behavior. Yeah. So I recognize that, and this is why it's such a great question, because initially while I was motivating them and they were getting pumped, and like you said, after the event, after the program, life sets in, their habits kick in, and then they go back to autopilot. Yeah. And I kept getting confused as to why they so high and then so low later. You know what I mean? It's like you've shown them the promised land, and they've just peeked into it, and now they don't want to get in. And I recognized that the gap was coaching. I recognized that the gap was to help them break those limiting beliefs, but also change behavior, right? One of the things I love doing, I love working out. I'm not as consistent as I should be, but I love working out. And I recognized that the moment I wanted to change my physicality, I needed to get a personal trainer. And so my coach comes, and he started changing my routine. So he took away my ability to make excuses through sanctions and consequence management, right? So each time I didn't show up, I would have to pay him for not showing up.
Accountability.
Right? And I was accountability, absolutely. So I was like, come on, man, I can't keep paying this guy just to get my own body in shape. It's either you ship up or you ship out. And that was so important. So what I started doing was incorporating that accountability into my coaching, where we build the frameworks for you to succeed, but we make it incredibly difficult for you to fail. And then when you fail, or if you fail, there are consequences. And the beautiful thing about, the programs that I do, usually they're group coaching sessions. So I'm a big believer, Jeff, in, one for all and all for one. So what normally happens is the moment we put them into teams for accountability, the moment one person tries to fall off the wagon, the entire team gets in the doghouse. Right. And all of a sudden, everybody's like, oh, my goodness, come on. I mean, so you mean my actions or inactions affects the team? Absolutely. So I just borrowed that model of accountability, ruthless execution,
Sorry, I'm going to dive into that. There's something you said there I love, because it's something I'm very passionate about is when you keep saying the word team.
Right.
And I love that, because a lot of and I try to break that mold. When I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs that have staff, a lot of times when it's a smaller business, they treat them like family, not as a team. Right. And I treat everything as a sports team. I always say that. So if you look at we're from Canada, hockey. So
Right.
if you look at a team, you have your first line, second line, third line, your fourth line. Your first line is your stars, but your fourth line is just as important. They have their role.
Absolutely.
So the first line might be paid more. They might have more ice time, but the fourth line has their role, and you have to treat everybody like a team. You can't first off think that everybody's going to be a superstar on your team. That's first off.
True.
But you have to have that accountability. If one person is not pulling their weight to do their actual position, they could be dropped, another person replaces them. So as long as you treat it as a team, and people understand that mindset as it's a team and you all have one end goal to win a championship, it has that mindset, right? So I, when you keep saying team, I just wanted to drive that in because that's something I'm very passionate about, is teaching everybody to run it as a team. You all have one end goal, right?
Absolutely. You're incredibly correct. So, so for me, that was a huge shift in being able to help people get results, where you tie their results also to their teams. So it's not just everyone thinking that, well, yeah, it's my business and I don't care whatever happens. Yeah, it's whatever. But for me, it's always very inclusive. It's that teamwork. And even leveling up, even just a little bit, is for me, even just going beyond the team, is to now make them regimented like an army. You know what I mean? To make them regimented like an army and say, these are the things that get done. Everybody's in sync. This is what needs to be done. Make it happen. I have a reputation over here for ruthlessness. So people say, Steve Harris is Mr. Ruthless Execution. And it works because people sometimes just need to be whipped into shape. So unfortunately, I'm not one of those coaches who perhaps wants to, tell me about your problems, where that's great. There's a place for that.
I love
but I'm all about execution. So
I'm exactly like you. I love that, Steve. I love that, because a lot of people, when they start taking these life coaching programs and they try to imply them into business, they're taking it as that almost that woohoo, that mindset where it's like, oh, I'm gonna inspire you. You're gonna do great.
Right.
No, at the end of the day, you got execution. At the end of the day, it's a business, and you have to understand and run it as a business. So the life coaching aspect is great because there's certain aspects of it that you could take and incorporate into sales, NLP into sales, different aspects of it.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, it's a business. It has to operate as a business.
Absolutely.
And I love that part of it. Yeah. So when you're doing these groups, how big are these groups? How many individuals do you try to group together? Because sometimes it can get very cluster messed if there's too many people, right?
Right. True. So what I do, so for the last session I had about 200 people in the program.
Yeah.
But I had them in groups of 30.
That's a fairly decent group.
It still works. And every team had a coach. So it wasn't just me. So every team had a coach.
Good.
Yes. So everyone could get that specialized attention, and there was a business coach who was working with them and then driving them to succeed. Because I always tell people, listen, if you want a friend, get a pet. If you want results, get a coach. That's what it is.
I'm gonna trademark that one. That's awesome. I love that.
Feel free. You know what I mean? So yeah. So and you're right, because sometimes people just want to come into this program just to be inspired and just be a part of a tribe. But if you're not getting anything done, Jeff, then there's no point. And for me, I'm all about results. It drives me crazy. I'm like, listen, you just can't come through a program and not do anything. My friend, there are people who actually, they pay for courses. They don't even watch the modules, Jeff. They don't even go through the modules. They just leave it be. I paid, tick the box, moving on. I'm like, you can't do that. Yeah. You've got to get results. So sometimes people aren't exactly very cool with my brand of getting them to get. And I tell them, listen, if you're not hungry, don't come near me. If you don't want to change your life, stay away from me. Just come to me when you're ready, and that's what it is. I'm
actually dropping on a coaching platform in a few weeks. I've been building it for 6 months, and my focus is on father entrepreneurs. That's my lane. That's where I'm comfortable at. That's what I've mastered. And with father entrepreneurs, is part of the programs is because that word was so strong when you're saying it, is we call it accountability. Right. It's your take action, and on a weekly basis, you have to do a certain task. Absolutely. If you don't do it, you're dropped off the program. That's part of the program, and you have to, because I see it come in, and you have to put thought into it. And if you don't put thought and do it, you're dropped off the program. That's the accountability of it, right? So I love that part of it. So with your coaching now, do any of the individuals you work with, have they come through the program now, become coaches with you? That's how
yes, absolutely.
I love it. Okay, good. Okay, absolutely. So that's how you build your coaches.
Yes, so that's how. So a lot of them have gone through the framework themselves, and there are people I trust, and people who've gotten results and helped other people get results. And so you have this amazing pool of people who've got the passion, who've got the character, who've got the competence, the capacity to make things work. So absolutely.
I love that. Let's dive into. We talked a little bit before we went on air. You're currently in Nigeria. Where were you born? Where did you start off? Where did you live prior? Let's get to know Steve.
All right. So, I have a multiplicity of experiences. So I was born in Nigeria, raised in Manchester in the UK, lived in the States for a bit, then came back to Nigeria and then moved. So I just tend to move all around.
So how long were you in the UK for when you were born there?
Oh, in the UK, I lived there for about 4 or 5 years. I went to school there for a bit.
Okay.
Then came back to Nigeria. Then my family, we went back to the States for a bit, to New Jersey for a bit. Then came back to Nigeria again. And, at least now I'm a mature adult, so I can go wherever I want to go. So, so just a bunch of experiences that I think shaped my behavior, or shaped not necessarily my behavior, but my outlook to life, and gave me a bit more exposure.
So when you moved to the United States, what age, how old were you? And you went with your family, I'm assuming?
It was just myself and my sister. So
oh, wow. Okay.
That was, so it was myself and my sister. Were about, 13, 14, about 14.
So you're a baby still. So you had family there?
Yes, I had family.
Okay.
So
that's a big change. How long were you guys there for?
About 3 years.
3 years. Did your sister come back or she stayed there?
Well, she came back with me, then eventually went back again. So she's in Texas and just enjoying her life.
In Texas? What part of Texas is she in? Austin, Texas is absolutely gorgeous.
I think she's in Dallas, somewhere called Palestine or something like that. I'm not too sure, location-wise.
Would you ever go back to the States to live?
Yes, definitely. I think so. I think Nigeria and the States are very, very paralleled in terms of the fact that they've got that, entrepreneurial, big energy hustle. You know what I mean? So Nigeria is very loud. We meet most Nigerians. We're very loud. We're very bodacious.
I grew up. Toronto. I don't know if you know. Have you ever been to Canada?
Not yet, but my brother's in Canada.
So Toronto, Canada is a very multicultural society. It's this great food, great nightlife. It's a beautiful city. And I grew up with a ton of Nigerian gentlemen, right? Amazing. So awesome. it was so it was very multicultural. At high school I went to, it was you had your Oriental, you had your Hispanic, you had your Europeans, you had we had such a mix. So you're in this great pool of just learning everybody's culture. So I grew up, and every Nigerian gentleman I ever met, exactly what you say, they're all hustlers. They're always finding a way to make a buck. They're all hustlers, 100% natural entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
Just ready to go. Always trying to find a way to, it was, we laugh about it because my best friend from my best man at my wedding, my best friend's Jamaican. And we grew up, it was me, Jules, and another gentleman. We grew up when we were younger with a Nigerian gentleman, and he was just the biggest. We lost contact over years, but he was this guy could hustle anything. If he wanted something, he would find a way to get it. It was incredible. Absolutely. So I love that part of it. So
it's that insane work ethic we have.
Yeah. It's this drive, right? So, and that's that natural entrepreneurs. You can't teach that. And I think you could inspire somebody to, like you said, we could get there and motivate somebody. You could put the tools in somebody's hands and teach them A to Z. This is how you're going to build this business. But if you don't have that work ethic, if you don't have that mindset where nobody tells me to get up at 4:30 every morning, I do it because I know it's going to allow me to be home at 3:00 to spend time with my kids. So it's having that mindset and that work ethic. If you could build it and drive it, it just happens. Do you believe that this is a question I guess everybody struggles with. Do you believe being an entrepreneur is a natural thing or something that can be taught?
I think it's a bit of both. I think it's a bit of both. I think, yes, there are natural born entrepreneurs. And I do think that there are people who get thrown into the murky waters of entrepreneurship and they have to either sink or swim. And they just pick up the skills pretty much quickly. So I do think it's a bit of both. While I would say, let me see, would I even consider myself? I'd say I was always a natural entrepreneur, but I was more strategic as opposed to.
So you learned the skills before.
Yeah. So I learned. Yeah. Exactly.
Which
so
is smart.
Everything I was. Yeah. So everything I was doing when I was working in the organization was more from the entrepreneurial perspective.
Yeah.
And I kept looking at it and saying, okay, this is great. Okay. Because one of the things, Jeff, that I tell people, especially, over here in Nigeria, because, there's that big buzz about people saying, fire your boss, quit your job, start your thing, do your thing. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. Right. I get it. But you're not going to be Superman. You don't become Superman when you literally leave your job. You've got to learn the business. And I tell people that, the problem with that, the reason why a lot of employees suck at entrepreneurship is they were so great at the job, they didn't learn the business. And that's two different things. They're so great at the job, they didn't learn the business. So let's say somebody was a customer service representative and she was doing that job really good. She knew how to smile. She had a great attitude, the whole 9 yards. But when it came to the business, she didn't understand how to recruit, how to hire, how to fire, how to market, how to advertise, how to pay taxes. She didn't know any of those things. So she came out of the business armed with skills that were only amazing for a job, but totally flunked at the business. And
I'm gonna give you an example. I had a guest on the other day that it hasn't aired the full episode yet. It'll air in January his name's Dr. Bill Dorfman.
Okay.
There's a reality show on TV called Extreme Makeover. He was the star of this reality show. He is like Hollywood's dentist for Oprah Winfrey. This guy's got 1.5 million followers. Like, he is the guru of dentists, cosmetic dentistry. And we had him on the podcast, and I loved hearing his story, where when he graduated school as a dentist, he had the opportunity to open up his own firm and his own practice. And what he did was, before he opened his own practice, he figured out, okay, I want to be in Hollywood. This is what I want to do. And he found the 5 most successful dentists, and he called them all up and he says, listen, he goes, I want to work for you for free. He goes, I'll dedicate 3 months of my life. And he goes, I worked, and he goes, I shadowed them for 3 months each. And he goes, as I shadowed them, he goes, I learned how they greeted guests, how the reception greeted guests, how they took money when they were done. How it's not just the dentistry. He goes, I learned every aspect of the business, why they're located on that street, which phone calls they took. He goes, I had studied everything, and then I went to the next one, studied everything. Right. When I was ready to start my own practice, he goes, I knew every skill. I knew every single skill. And he goes, a real entrepreneur never builds his own wheel kind of thing. Is that whole saying where you look at somebody that's been very successful at the field that you want to get into, and you take certain parts of what they've done and apply it to yourself and build your own self, right? So I love that part when he said, he goes, I did that. And then he goes, once I got to that point, he goes, I realized for me to get to another level, he goes, I had to get a certain amount of publicity. So he goes, the first thing I did was hire a publicist. He goes, which dentist hires a publicist? So he hired a publicist. And then he goes, I learned very quickly. He goes, I fire my publicist every year. I go, why would you fire your publicist? He goes, after 1 year, he goes, I've sucked all their contacts. He goes, I start with a new publicist. And he's that mindset is incredible.
That's strategic. That's amazing.
But it's having that mindset. And he goes, if you could actually have people to understand that, and like you said, it's okay working for somebody if you're going to be able to suck and take in all their knowledge and be able to learn from it. It's life lessons, right? It's life lessons. So I'm assuming, have you ever had a mentor yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's talk about that.
So I've got some amazing mentors, and chief of them is a gentleman over here in Nigeria. His name is Fela Durotoye. He is an incredible entrepreneur. He technically is Nigeria. He's unarguably, I dare say, Nigeria's best motivational speaker, and arguably Nigeria's most successful business coach, right?
Seriously.
And I absolutely. So I absolutely got the privilege of working with him from 2005 till about 2010.
How did you meet him? Where did you meet him?
Amazing. I met him at church, which is oddly enough. I met him at church because at the time I met him, Jeff, I was in all shades of trouble, man. I was in all shades of trouble. I was in a really dark place in my life. I had dropped out of school twice. I had a bunch of issues with my professors, and I got kicked out of school. So I was in that place where I was this really angry young man who felt like he had a lot of capacity, but no one was going to be willing to give him a chance. And so, getting kicked out of school, and Nigeria is very heavy on academic achievements and qualifications.
Yeah.
So, like you said, you've parlayed with Nigerians, they're very big on education, go to school, get a job, be a doctor. Yeah. And we have that. And my family's like that as well. And so getting kicked out of school, not once, but twice, that puts you in a class all by yourself. Yeah. So of course I lost my self-esteem. I was really, really depressed. I was suicidal at the time. Wow. And I went to church. I had just gotten a job as an intern because I really couldn't get a real job. So no one was going to hire me because I didn't have any qualifications. So I got a job volunteering. I later became an intern. And I realized when I was going home from work that day, I didn't have enough money to get home. And so I kind of figured that, maybe the midpoint between my house and, work is church. So I remember that there was a friend of mine at church who lived within my area, and I was hoping I could hitch a ride with him so that, I could, we could split the fare. And so I go to church that day. I'm not interested in having a relationship with God. Me and God, as far as I was concerned, God had screwed me over and I wasn't interested. So I go to church just to wait for the service to be over so I can hitch a ride home. And this gentleman walks in. And, I remember that day my pastor had asked me to be his protocol officer, for the day, his assistant for the day. And I really wasn't in the mood. And, fella could tell that I was not in the mood. So he was like, listen, kid, go sit down, have a good time in the service. Just don't worry about it. I was like, I like you. I'm gone. So I got just go sit down.
So this time you had no idea who he was.
I had no idea. No idea who. And so in the middle of the service, I'm listening to this guy, and all of a sudden I started feeling something I hadn't felt for years. I started feeling hope, because he was very inspirational. I started feeling, okay, my life is bad, but it's not bad enough for me to want to kill myself. And based on what this guy is saying and, about God and about my life, then I guess it's not that bad after all. So I go to meet him later to, thank him for the opportunity. And he and I just struck up a conversation. And in about 6 months, I started volunteering at his organization. Now, Jeff, trust me when I tell you, my parents were not a fan of this idea because, as you know, well, over here in Nigeria, I don't know about there in Canada, but most volunteers don't get paid. You know what I mean?
Even here, it's the same thing. Yeah, of course. Yeah,
exactly. So I was literally going to his office, which was miles away from my home. It wasn't convenient at all. And my parents thought I was crazy because I left this other job where I was at least an intern, getting paid a little paycheck. And my parents were financing my lifestyle, obviously. So the moment they heard I quit the job to go work.
How old are you? How old are you at this point?
Then I was, so I'm 41 now. So 2005, which is 15 years, I was about 26. I was about 26. Yeah. It was pretty old, but it's pretty old to be.
I got married at 27.
There we go.
Yeah, so, I had my first kid at 29.
There we go. I got married at 30. So
we're a couple of years apart. So you were born in 79.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
your story.
So yeah, basically that was it. So, I started volunteering and, like you said, started observing the room. I was looking at the other consultants who were really amazing, and I started learning. And again, fella hired me as a volunteer, but I became literally like an intern. I started just watching and learning, observing. Then when the consultants would go home, I would stay a little bit longer, and I'd look at the presentation slides, how they wrote proposals. I would start recreating those proposals and just learning. And, fast forward, maybe in about a year, I got this amazing opportunity, even though I was still an office assistant or I was still a college dropout. And in about a year, I just started bringing in results and, making it rain in the firm, as the case may be. My confidence began to grow. And he's an amazing mentor, still is an amazing mentor to me till this day. So, yeah.
Have you had any other mentors along the way? Or that was just your main one?
I've got a bunch of mentors. Some guys one of them is in oil and gas. He's the CEO of a major oil and gas firm here. There's another guy who's into branding. There's another guy who is a real estate expert. So just, some people here and there. I have a mentor in issues of my relationships and family and things. So
you've associated yourself nicely in different areas. I'm thinking about it. That's smart. You're building your networks in different ways, right? How important do you believe networking is? And I'm going to tell you why I said that in a sec.
I think it's important. I think you can't be an island by yourself. I think, they say your network determines your net worth. Yeah. But I also think that the quality of your net. So let me put it this way: the worth of your nets determines your network, which determines your net worth. Yeah. Because I think a lot of people come into a networking relationship to get, as opposed to recognizing what can I bring to the relationship as well. Yeah. What are my nets worth in this relationship? So I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah, 100%. I have that mindset where there's two things I do every single week, and I tell other entrepreneurs to do is, and as we're talking, I'll explain this why I'm saying this to you, but I always try to network every single week with 3 like-minded or 3 individuals that I want to scale myself to be in whatever category, whether it's personal, business, fitness. So I look at 3 and I connect myself and I try to build a bond with them, because you try to learn off each other, right? Because I have things that I feel like I give to people and they can give back. And then like even yourself, like reaching out to you. I mean, it's the platform I'm giving you, but at the same time too, as I'm learning more about you, Steve, is like, I can see myself knowing you for the next 15, 20 years and you coming to Canada and visit us. Absolutely. Like you have that personality, right? So another thing too is I network people. So what I mean is, as I'm talking to you, there's somebody I'm thinking that you guys would connect to. So as soon as we're done here, I want to connect you to. So I also network and connect people. And I think that is very important to do, because if I connect you to another individual and you guys become friends and create a bond, and years later, who's the common denominator always? Me.
You, absolutely.
So I think that's very important to not only connect yourself, but also connect. If you find that you could have individuals in your connection or in your group that would mesh together and work together, connect them together. I think that's very important. A lot of people are very selfish. Sure. They don't do that. And I think that is a very important thing to do, because you're just consistently building your network. It's building this massive spider web. So I think it's very important. Networking is something I'm very passionate about, because I think it just opens up so much more opportunity, but it also builds so much more friendships and lifetime connections, right?
True. Absolutely. Well said. I couldn't have said it better myself. Absolutely.
So fitness, let's get back into that. You get a little smile. Where do you put that on a scale of importance in your life? If you're to look at family, business, fitness, like where would you put that on a scale? And I always say that because I have something I want to talk to you about as well.
Well, for me, I think family is the most important for me. Definitely, okay. No doubt about it. That is the most important thing for me. Being not just having a good name, so to speak, but also creating the right quality memories for my family. I'm trying my best to be the greatest husband to my wife and the greatest dad to my kids. So for me, that's incredibly important. Next for me, I think in this scale would be business. And then probably for me would be fitness. And full disclosure, like I said, I love to work out, but I haven't been the most consistent at it. And I know that I've fallen off the wagon a couple of times, but it is incredibly, incredibly important to be healthy, incredibly important to stay in shape. And it just gives you the opportunity to be here a lot while longer, to take care of the business and most importantly, take care of your family.
Okay, I'm gonna throw this back at your face because I want you to think of something. I have always originally, I would say 12 years ago, business was my priority, and then family, and then fitness, and then it became family, business, fitness, just like you.
Right. Yeah.
In the last 4 to 5 years, I realized, and I put fitness as the top of the pinnacle.
Interesting.
And I'll explain why. If you're not healthy, if you're not fit, if something were to happen to your health, would you be able to be there for your family?
Absolutely not.
If you're in a hospital bed, are you able to drive that Porsche?
Heck no.
Fitness and health, your health should be the top of your pinnacle, because if you're healthy and you're strong, now you'll be able to spend the time with your family, provide to your family, spend the time with the business, grow the business. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs have to start putting health and their own health at the top of the pinnacle, because if you're not, we only have one body. You can't replace our body. So, I mean, with technology, the way stem growth and stuff, maybe one day we will, but at this point we can't. So I've seen a lot of successful entrepreneurs not take care of their bodies and fall into a situation where now it's not only I love my family. I'm trying to provide for my family. I'm trying to spend time with my family. I'm trying to build members of my family. But now it's the opposite. I'm putting burden on my family because I'm sick. I'm putting stress
Right.
on my family because I'm sick. My parents are stressed out because they're seeing their son that's sick. So I've seen that happen to other entrepreneurs. So in the last few years, I've decided to put health at the top of my pinnacle. And it's not, when I'm talking about health, it's not you have to be a six pack for, it's movement, eating healthy,
Right.
taking your vitamins every day, moving. But also I talk about health as spiritually. That's just,
Right.
I don't believe in, I'm not going to say believe. I don't call it meditating. I don't call it prayer. I spend every day breathing time, which I just reflect on a day and just allow your mind is part of your body. So mentally, physically,
Yeah.
that whole holistic approach where if you could take care of yourself and you're at a good level with yourself, everything else just comes, I think, naturally. So I think health is, that's something I would like you to even mindset and think where health is very, very important, right? Just in the
You're
mindset
right.
of keeping it up there,
You're,
right?
you're right. But you're right, because the truth is, we generally just take it for granted. It can get up and walk away, get up and just climb a flight of stairs until you can't. And then you realize what a blessing it is to be able to do the things you take for granted. So absolutely. I mean, I'll put it more in my consciousness. So fitness, family, business. There we go.
I love it. So your daughter, 9 years old, you said?
Yes, she's 9.
So 9 years
She's
old, she
9.
was born in 2009.
Yes.
Okay. So
She's 2011. She was born
11,
in
11. I'm
2000.
thinking my son. My son's 12. Yeah. 2011. Yeah. 2011. That made you think there. How did your life change from that moment on?
Oh
I had a
man.
daughter first too. And that's just, I mean, I'll be honest, it's probably the first time I naturally cried in my life when she was born. I was there in
Right.
the delivery, and it just tears were shutting down my face, and it was just a natural, like, wow, what's happening here? But
It's such a blessing. It's such a blessing. My daughter's name is Paris, and so she's just an incredible blessing to us because we tried several times before we could have her. So we had a bunch of in and outs before we could have her, and when she eventually showed up, she's such a blessing, and she's such a sweet kid. You know what I mean? She's really kind, really considerate. She's a communicator. I don't know where she got that from. She's a communicator. She actually also is an author. So she wrote her first book over here when she was 5 years old. And yeah, she's just an incredible blessing. And it is a blessing to be, her dad. And my life changed significantly because, there's this song by Will Smith. I'm trying to remember. It's Just the Two of Us by Will Smith. It's a rap song. And it's an incredible song because, it talks about the promises he made to his son or his kids from the moment he saw them and just dedicated himself to being such a better man and an example. And every day I try to be a little bit of a better example to my daughter, just by showing her what love is, how to be, kind and graceful. And, for me, I want one day, I don't know if you're religious or not, but I'm Christian, and there's one of the scriptures that says, a good name, right, is better than riches. And for me, one of the things that really blows my mind is wanting to be able to, give my children such a good name that once anyone says, "Oh, who's your dad?" Like, "Oh, Steve Harris," that will count for something. Not because Steve Harris is wealthy and, amen to that, but technically wealthy in terms of good deeds and just being such a good person to make a difference. So yeah, that's important to me.
yeah, and building, like I said, it's all about, I think a lot of parents, and that's why a lot of entrepreneurs, and I find especially with fathers, they lose that connection because they're so focused on their business when their children are young. And there's a stat, and a lot of people aren't aware of this stat, but they say 80% of the face time you have with your children is before the age of 18. Think
Well,
about that. And if most parents were to know that stat, would they change how much time they spend with their children?
true.
And it's
That's
also
true.
about building the memories. Like, I love what you're saying. You're trying to fill her with love and stuff, because a lot of, I find, and this is something I'm passionate about, I find in a circle of individuals that sometimes I hang around with, or I knew, when they would be so focused on their business, and how they would compensate that time is bringing home gifts to their children.
Yes.
And
Right.
your child,
Right.
when you give a gift to your child, they're happy for that moment, but they're not happy for that gift. They're happy because dad's recognizing them, dad's spending time with them that minute or two, dad's showing appreciation
Yeah.
for them. So what I've done, and I've done over the last few years, is quite a few years now, is when my daughter or my son complete or do something special, or they get an A in school, or they graduate something, or they do well, and my daughter at her dance recital, I don't reward them with a present. I reward them with time. So what I do with
Right.
them is I'll actually pull my daughter out of school and say, come on, Sierra, her name's Sierra. And I'll say, Sierra, let's go. We're going to go spend the day. I'll pull her out of school and go do her nails, go have lunch with her, spend time. Those
Awesome.
memories are something that she'll remember 10, 20, 30 years from now. Not that present that a year from now she'll forget about, or 10 minutes later she'll put aside, right? So building those memories are very important. Do you take a lot of photos?
I do. I actually do. I mean, let me just quickly even backtrack with even
Yeah.
what you just said, because that's such a powerful thing. For me, it was so important when my daughter came into my life that I actually moved my life around to accommodate her and my family. So I work from home. You know what I mean? I used to have a fancy office, blah, blah, blah. But I wanted to see my kids grow up. You know what I mean? So any moment from now, it's very possible my daughter would walk in here, kiss me on the forehead, and probably sit and play. I wanted those memories. I didn't want to be that dad who she would see on television or read about in the papers who's saving the world. But she just doesn't know. She just knows about him, but she doesn't know who he is. And so for me, that was so important to just build my life around my family where, just like you said, I want to see them grow up. I want to spend time. I want to be able to, have conversations with my wife. I want my daughter to be able to walk in when I'm having a major conference and I'm not shooing her away. I'm like, yeah, you can come, so that's just what it is. So for me, like you said, those memories are so important. So that, we can create them. And yes, I do take some photos.
Do you realize that, we'll go to photos, but do you realize as you're talking, you're naturally saying something that I preach all the time, and it's something I want to talk about quickly, is success is measured by freedom. That your success has allowed
absolutely.
you to have the freedom. Success is not measured by wealth.
True.
I drive a Jeep Wrangler. I could drive a lot more expensive car. It's nothing to do with that. It's be able to. I drive a Jeep Wrangler because it fits my lifestyle. I can throw my dog in, like, it's functional. So you have to understand that, and it's something where I did a post on recently about something, Steve. My father, they're immigrants to Canada, my parents, and they came here, and God bless them. They were smart enough to do one thing. The first thing they got here is they couldn't speak English. My mom was 18. My dad was 24. They came to Canada with absolutely not a penny in their pocket. And the first thing they did was register themselves in college, into school. They finished their high school. They went to college, and they got a trade. That trade my father got never ended up working because my mom got pregnant with my older sister. And at that time, he needed income. So he went automatically, started working at Ford Motors, which is a factory.
Right.
Fast forward years later, he had me 6 years later. And one thing I never understood as a kid, and now as an adult, I could reflect back and see my father, which was amazing, understood that wealth was measured by freedom.
Absolutely.
Even at that age, even though he was a blue collar factory worker, he realized that. What I mean by that is, back then, working at a factory in Canada at Ford, you're getting paid like $30 an hour, which was insane. But on weekends, you would get time and a half. Every single, at that point, my uncles came from my uncles and all that came from Portugal as well. My dad got them all into Ford, and they're all working there. They all worked every weekend. My dad never worked one weekend in 30 years at the factory, because every weekend he wanted to be home with his family. And he also would block all his holidays in the summer for 4 weeks. We get in the car and we drive up to Massachusetts, Cape Cod, and we spend a month on the beach every summer building memories. So my father was already understanding that success was wealth. It was not about the money. How many years ago, not being an entrepreneur? So now I can sit back and reflect on that, and I feel blessed that I was able to. And my father never missed a sporting event. My father, no matter what he did, he was always there. Even though he sacrificed, he could have made a lot more money had not bigger houses. Yep. But you know what? As a kid, we didn't have a lot, but I felt like we had everything.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's very important. It's not about materialistic items. It's about that love, that passion, coming home and having that vibration at home, having that energy at home, having that thing. I actually teach entrepreneurs this. There's times when there's two things I find with a lot of entrepreneurs is work's never perfect. You're gonna have days you're good, days you're bad, days you're stressed out. But I always tell them is leave the negativity on the porch. So there's two things I actually teach. One is if you've had a shit day where somebody's cut you off in traffic, or so you had something argue with somebody at the grocery store, or something happened at work that's bad. When you're on your way home and you're feeling that negative energy, I always tell them, drop down the rear view mirror, look at yourself and tell yourself, I love my family and I'm going to have a great night. Reflect that and then take a deep breath and then go in. Or another thing too is when you're coming home is just having that mindset of, like I said, just leaving everything outside. And it's like, it's a new day, a new chapter when you get home. Right. So being able to do that as an adult and see that was my dad. And he was teaching me lessons without even knowing he was teaching me lessons. Right. Which is pretty amazing. Right.
No, that's amazing. Cause just thinking about it, paying it forward, it's quite interesting to say, what are we teaching our kids, even subconsciously?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, that could either be a scary concept or a really empowering one that just makes you become more intentional and deliberate to create the right kind of frameworks that your kids will pick up. And one day they're going to be like, oh, that's what dad was trying to do. Absolutely. Absolutely, bro.
Yeah, I love that. And I love these podcasts because you learn off other individuals. I had another gentleman on the other day, and his father was a very high level salesman. And he was always teaching where your words are very impactful, how you ask for things. This is pure off topic, but we're just talking about fatherhood now.
It's perfect.
And he actually said this. He goes, he remembers certain things that his father taught him when he was young that impacted his whole life. And one little example, he said, he goes, one day he remembers this so clearly. He was sitting on the carpet in the living room watching TV, and his dad was on the floor, and his dad's knee was cut in front of the TV. And he goes, Dad, can you put down your knee? And his dad turned around and he goes, knee, you're dumb. Knee, and he started putting down his knee. And he's like, no, Dad. He goes, I meant you lower your knee. He goes, okay, if you learn one thing you're going to learn off me is if you're going to ask a question, use the proper words to ask the question, have intention behind the question. So something like that he has taken on his whole life, where now he actually teaches how to ask proper questions. That's part of his business is if you want to accomplish something, you want to get something, learn how to ask the proper question. Where his father at like 6 years old was teaching him that subconsciously, right? So it's as parents, we're essentially, you have to think about this. As to your child, you're God.
Yes.
You're their first representation of God. They look up to you. You feed them. You provide for them. You love them. You take care of them. You nourish them. So you're everything to them. So every impact, every single thing you do, every negativity you bring to them, you're teaching that. You're engraving that into their well-being, and it's becoming part of their fabric. So parents have to understand that. Parents arguing, like I obviously you want to have parents that have a strong relationship and things. But I also am a strong believer, if there's such negativity in the household and parents are not getting along, they've separated, it's better to separate than to stay together and teach that negativity around that kid, because they're just learning that and they're building on that, and it's becoming part of their fabric too, right? I know we just went off topic here.
I mean, I've been married. It's perfect because I've been married about 11 years and I have never argued with my wife in front of my daughter. We've never raised our voices. When we want to talk, when we want to argue, we just go to sit in the car. We'll sit in the car, turn on the music.
But that's important.
Yeah, so that we create the right environment so she doesn't pick up the wrong stuff. Oh man, true, absolutely.
How do you believe in the word fear? I want to talk about that too. These are all topics that we're diving somewhere totally else, but I think these are all important topics where we are. The word fear, how does that work with you?
Let me see. For me, I don't know. I think I've built a reputation, or I built my life doing things afraid. You know what I mean? I've succeeded through failure. It sounds paradoxical, but failure got me here. If I didn't drop out of school when I did, if I didn't have, those suicidal tendencies, if I didn't take those L's and become a janitor, an office assistant, an intern, those perhaps are things that people say, oh, you failed, or you flunked school, you didn't do this, you don't have a college degree,
Let me dive into one thing what you're saying there. When you failed, did you ever spend the time to reflect on your failure, or you just moved on?
Well, I think I do a bit of both, to be honest. Because I mean, first of all, I'm the first kind of guy who something goes wrong, I take responsibility. What did I do to screw this up? You know what I mean? Because I need to learn from that. And then I don't, I don't throw a pity party. I don't dwell on it too much. Once in a while, I do get down in the dumps, as every human does.
100%.
But I move on. I move on. I'm like, okay, next. So, I know it sounds cliche, but listen, when I fail, I'm like, I'm going to fail forward. I'm not going to stew in my own juices and marinate in my failure. I will learn the lessons. I'd ask myself, what could I have done better? And once I've gotten the lessons, then move on, because you're always going to fail, Jeff. You're always going to fail. You're always going to make mistakes, but you should strive to make new mistakes, not repeat the old ones.
There's so many things I want to talk to you about, but one thing I teach my kids, and these are, I think this is important for the audience to hear, is with failure. And I always tell my children that I try to instill from a young age. And I think that's, you're very much like that, because you have that ruthless mindset. Is I want my kids to be number one. I go, if you're into a competition, you're entering because you want to be number one. You're not going there to be number two, number three. You try to build that winning mentality from a very young age. And I'm very aggressive with, thank you. You can go to my old podcasts. I think that's the biggest bullshit people could do is participate. I tell my kids to throw that crap in the garbage. So I always tell my kids, if they enter a competition, I'll give you an example. My daughter enters a high level dance competition, she finishes third place. I'm okay with that. But I tell her, I want you to sit down, and I go, watch the video of the second place girl. What did she do differently to get second place? Study it. Watch the first place girl. What did she do differently to get first place? Study it. Now reflect on what you did wrong. Learn from it. So when you get to the competition, now you automatically know what it takes to get to second or to first. And now you know your mistakes, not to reflect them. So I think it's important to, as parents, we have to look at that. And your children are going to fail. We're going to fail. But being able to learn from the failure to get better the next time around. If you fail and you keep failing, then you got an issue. But if you're failing and you learn from it, right? So I went off topic that we started with the word fear.
No, but this is great. This is this is great. No, but that's how you know we're having a great conversation, because it's just a multiplicity of things. But yeah, so failure got me this far, and I do everything afraid. I've got this bluff and bluster, like, oh, I'm ruthless. I can get whatever. I don't care. So, but I do get afraid. I mean, my wife will testify that I'm sitting, where she and I are in bed together, and I'm just contemplating all the things that could possibly go wrong. And after contemplating that, I'm like, okay, what could possibly go right? And I think about all of that. I'm like, okay, all right. So let's go. Either way, you don't know. So you know what? Let's do this. So fear for me is always a good motivator. I always say that fear is proof positive that what I want exists. You know what I mean? Fear is proof positive that what I want exists. So if it's either I'm afraid because I don't think I'm worthy once in a while, or I don't think I deserve, or I don't think I'm good enough. But whatever that fear is, it's proof that what you want exists. So you might as well just go. I mean, you wouldn't fear anything that you didn't know existed. You fear something that you exist. So I'm like, it's like being afraid of, the bogeyman or something like that. You're afraid, quote unquote, because you know it exists in one shape or form. But if you don't know it exists, you can walk through a graveyard without, there's no drama. But if you're afraid of ghosts or afraid of demons and things like that, you walk through a graveyard, you're like, oh my God, holy water everywhere, So fear for me is proof that what you want exists.
Do you believe in, and this is another thing we're going to talk about right now, we're going to dive into, do you believe in fear is something that we instill in our children?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good.
Oh yeah. Especially when you said, don't do this, don't do that, don't.
Exactly. Yeah. I had this conversation the other day, and it's something I'm actually passionate about teaching other parents, other fathers is you always hear that reflection or that memory in your mind of your mom or your dad saying, hey, don't touch the stove, you're going to burn your hand. Don't run down the stairs, you're going to fall. Yeah. And you're constantly building that. And then once you get into society, it's that fear of, oh my God, that person failed. I don't want to look like they fail. Yeah. So it's that constant, you're just growing and growing these fears, where I think you're a little different. I think you're saying fear, but I don't think that's fear. I think that's more excitement, because the adventure, because a lot of those jitters, that's being alive. If you got butterflies and nerves, that's being alive. If you're going to a situation where you're going to step on stage or you're going to talk to somebody and you don't have a little bit of butterflies, what's going to happen today, you're not really living, because that
Sure.
thing, that means nothing to you. So you want to be living in a situation where you're constantly having those butterflies, constantly having, because you're growing, you're developing. That's a great sign, right? So
Absolutely.
with my kids, one thing, and parents maybe take something from all this, is once a month, we find something that one of our kids is fearful with, and we do it as a family. We actually conquer it as a family, because there's nothing more enjoyable of like seeing your child conquer something, and the excitement of like, I did it. And that
Yeah.
self-belief over time starts building and building and building. As
Yeah.
they get
It's
older,
reinforced. Yeah.
it just becomes butterflies. It's that
Right.
excitement of doing something. It's not that fear. And I think you don't have fear. I think, like you said, it's that excitement of the unknown. And then once you do it, it's like, okay, like, and I think it's a natural entrepreneur as well, is like that once you accomplish it, it's like, okay, I've done it. Now let's get on. It's almost like I got to move on to the next thing kind of thing, which is so passionate, right?
I don't usually spend time to even dwell on my successes as much as
me neither.
So done, next, moving on, let's go.
Next.
That's what
yeah. Where's the word believe? How strongly do you work on the word believe?
I think I'm a walking belief system by myself. I'm the epitome of belief. I'm Christian, so one of my foundations is, it says I can do all things through Christ, and I believe it. I believe that, I can be anything. I can do anything. I believe that, I'm God. I'm the representation of God, and so there are no limits to what I want to achieve. It's just, for me, it's just, again, reconciling that humanity that says, either maybe it's a belief system in my mind that probably tells you you're not good enough, or you're not so sure. But then there's the excitement, there's the thrill that comes to say, you know what, I'm going to prove this, whether it's right or wrong, I don't know, but I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to do this well. If I'm going to fail, I'm just going to fail. It's going to be the most epic fail in the world of epic fails, and let's just go out and do it well. So I'm a big believer in belief. And I think if you believe you can. You can. If you can't, then you can. But it all starts first in your mind.
As humans, we have so much potential, and I think that word is taking away from a lot of us when we're younger. And it's that mindset of that fear of the unknown, the fear of failure, right? And that fear of failure crumbles you not to believe anymore.
Yeah.
And before we went on air, and I'm very open with my son. One thing I knew from day one with him, to get him to walk and get him to run and get him to do everything he's done. He's like a 12-year-old fitness kid, shredded to the bone, fitness fanatic. Right. And how to get him is I had to instill belief in him. And I knew that he was going to go to school and be wearing braces. Kids are going to look at him differently. He was going to be developed slower than most kids. Sorry, give me one sec. Why did that run off? He was developed slower than most kids. So that belief system was so valid.
Absolutely.
And one thing I did with both my kids, and I've actually documented, I've talked about it, is when they were younger, I got these signs made for their outside their doors, these little wood signs, and it was hand painted saying "Believe in yourself," and I put them outside their bedroom door. And every night when they go to bed, I would tell them to look up and say that and repeat that to themselves. Right. And building that, instilling them as a young kid, saying, "Hey, you could do it. You could do it. You could do it. You could do it." You're constantly in creating that belief system in them. So as they get older, it becomes part of their fabric, right?
Absolutely. My daughter and I mean, since she was, I think from the moment she could talk, right? Yeah. I think she heard maybe when she was 2, we started some affirmations for her every day. Yeah. Every day. So some sort of like little nursery rhyme type affirmations.
Yeah.
But it constantly reinforced the fact that she was blessed, constantly reinforced the fact that she was a genius, constantly reinforced the fact that she was smarter than the average bear. You know what I mean? And it was just the constant repetition. And till today, you know what I mean? So she says it. So, when we have conversations, so you can't do this. She says, "But Dad, you said never say you can't." So it's now in her DNA, Jeff. You know what I mean? So I have to, I almost literally have to like rearrange my words, because she's been conditioned to have a counter argument to something that does not tie with what she believes. You know what I mean?
Your daughter, author. Where did that start from? I love that.
That was really crazy. I think she had some schoolwork, and they were supposed to write about. What was supposed to write about? I don't know, some school homework that she had. Maybe they're supposed to write a story or something or the other, and she just took to it. So she started writing the story, and you know how kids have very short attention spans, so she'd write and go play, write and go play. We just noticed that she was always carrying this book about. She was always carrying this notebook, and she would scribble. So we're like, what are you doing? You're writing a diary or something? And no, she said it's for a school project. So, before we knew it, she had turned in the paper, but she still kept writing and scribbling. So one day out of curiosity, and I hadn't noticed, but my wife had, and she was like, what are you doing? She says, well, I'm writing a story. So, okay, what's the story about? And I think she said it was something about the magic chicken and something or the other. I can't remember what it was. But here's the interesting thing, Jeff. So when people would come to the house, she would ask them, would you like me to read my story for you? I wrote a book. She'll say, I wrote a book and I'd like to read my story for you. And so she'd go bring her book, her little scribbles, and then she'd read the story to every guest that came over. And it dawned on us as parents, being able to give motion to her vision. We figured, what the heck, let's go all out. So we got an illustrator, printed the book, cartoonesque and all that sort of thing. And so she had her first book. You know what I mean? And, and again, it's that thing, like you talked about your dad and instilling values and being a salesman. And my daughter has this, again, it's that natural entrepreneurial thing. So people would come over and she would say to them, oh, I wrote a book. Can I show it to you? And she would say, yeah, oh, absolutely. Just a cute little girl, bring your book out. I'd like to take a look at it. And then, she tells, you look at the book, you're like, oh, it's so pretty. And then she tells you, oh, it's $3.
It's crazy that. Okay, quick question. I'm going to reverse on this. If you reflect to yourself when you were younger, obviously you said coming from Nigeria, you're a natural hustler and entrepreneurial juices ran through you. Could you see yourself have this natural entrepreneurial side when you were younger? Now you reflect on yourself as a child.
To be honest, not so much. So much. Again, because there's that thing that we do as parents, like you alluded to that before, like where we're trying to protect our kids. We're trying to protect them from disappointment. We're trying to protect them from this, that, and the other. So I lived a bit of a very sheltered youth, so to speak. So there are a lot of things that my parents didn't allow me to do that I decided to do when I got into, either high school or college. I'd say, heck it, I'm going to do it, but it's quite interesting that with my daughter, it's a little bit different that she's doing it. She's just getting it done. And we're like, okay, finished product. Give me. We'll make it into something else. Yeah. So she's giving us the raw materials. She's put in the work and then she gives it to us and then we make it more beautiful. So it's such a beautiful place to be.
Yeah. And being able as a parent to notice that and water it and let it grow is pretty special.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a very, very important thing to do.
I agree. Cause I tell people that, birds don't go to flight school. You know what I mean? Fish don't take swimming lessons. No. There's something that everyone is wired to do that comes to them naturally. It's in their DNA. And your job as a parent is to find it, to water it, like you said,
exactly.
Expression. That I believe that.
Exactly. And it's crazy you're saying that because my daughter, from a very young age, it was just this automatic hustle with her. She was the one I remember, like the same thing, like 6, 7 years old. She got a kit and she went to the shop with my wife and asked to buy all these things. And she would be making all these bracelets and coming home. And I'm like, where'd you get this money? She goes, oh, I'm making bracelets and selling them to my friends at school for $2. Like she was naturally doing. She's the one that's always like, I'm going to set up a lemon stand. She's always constantly, even at 14 now. About a couple of weeks ago, she's on the weekend. She's all over the computer. I'm like, what are you doing, Sierra? And she's like, oh, I'm working down. I'm like, what do you mean you're working? She goes, I found this website. It's all legit. I checked it out. I showed mom. She goes, if I do this many surveys, I get this much money. So I think it was like 40 surveys, you get $5. She goes, so every weekend, if I do this many surveys, I'll come back with 50. Like she's had this all calculated, this hustle. And it's like most 14-year-olds don't do it. And one thing I've instilled in both my kids from a young age is fitness. We talked about that. Fitness is such an important thing because I believe if you're fit, you're healthy, you're going to be more confident going to school and all that stuff. So and especially with my son, fitness was a huge aspect of him. And both my kids, they work out they work out 5-6 times a week by themselves. Like, which 12 and 14-year-old, you'll come home and my daughter at 7 at night is doing an hour run on the treadmill, and having that mindset where they understand how much fitness is going to benefit them. And I've instilled it. So now it's part of their DNA as well. But I love that. So yeah, if anybody listening, if your children have a certain tendency or a certain your job as a parent is to extract them out of them and feed it and provide it and let it grow and see where it goes. And your daughter is going to probably change 10, 15 different more times by the time she actually turns a teenager, but it's your job to keep feeding them and allowing her to find her own passion, which I think is very, 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 very important. I love that. So marriage, where'd you meet your wife?
It's quite interesting. I met her first at, there was there was like a high school summer camp. Let's call it summer camp. Yeah. Summer camp, pretty much. That's where we first met many, many years ago. And the first time I saw her, of course, I was like, this girl is hot. You know what I mean? And I wasn't the only one. I think my best friend at the time also said she was hot. And both of us flipped a coin to get the opportunity to go, because we're like, come on, we're bros. We can't fight over a girl. So we're just going to be gentlemen, toss a coin, flip a coin. And I think he won the right to ask her out. She turned him down. She dropped him like a bad habit. So we hung out for that summer camp for a bit, just became friends vaguely. Then I think I met her again, maybe probably 12, 13 years later at church. I was going to a meeting with a pastor at a church, and once the program was over, I was like, I was like, oh, I know you. So I was like, oh, hey, you really look familiar. She was like, wait a second, is that the line? That's the line you want to use on me? You look familiar. Like, dude, really? So I'm like, no, but seriously, you really do look familiar. So yeah, that's where we first hooked up, and yeah, we connected.
Do you realize the common denominator there, where all these good things have happened to you?
Tell me.
You met your first mentor in church.
In church, yeah. Church
changed your life. You met your wife in church. So obviously there's a common denominator there.
I better hang out at church more though.
That's it. I'm not a religious person. I wasn't brought up in a religious family, but I was brought up in a family where I believe in karma. I believe in purpose, and I believe in my mom instilled this into me from a very young age is everybody has a purpose in your life. And that was something she instilled from a young age, where she said, if you walk down the street and you're having a bad day and somebody just smiles at you, and I think that's important, such an important thing, the smile, that could just change the rest of your day. And that person, for that 1 second, had a purpose in your day. Whether you meet somebody in a grocery store and you talk to them in line for 5 minutes, or you have someone in your life for 10 years and they all of a sudden you separate or disconnect, you don't feel sorry about that. You understand their purpose was there for that time, and those 10 years were special, and you move on from it. So understanding the importance of purpose, of what people have in your life, and understanding that impact, and understanding too, in a flip side, anybody that doesn't have a purpose in your life. What I mean is you're always going to surround yourself with negative people, even though you don't want to, and you have to dwindle that away. Even if they're family members, you don't have to cut them off, but you need to keep surrounding yourself around people that are going to bring your vibration up, make you more of a better person. That's all you want to do, is create yourself to be a better version of you every day, kind of thing, right?
I agree. Well said. I agree.
So there's 2 questions I always ask all our entrepreneurs at the end of our podcast, and one of them you actually answered earlier, but I'm going to re-ask you. If something were to happen to you today, how would you want to be remembered in a few words by your closest relatives or your family? And you actually answered this earlier, but I'm going to let you do it again.
Well, I'm hoping they'd say that, he made a difference. You know what I mean? No matter how small, he made a difference. I tell people that your candle, no matter how small you think the light in your candle is, it's bright enough to get somebody out of darkness. You know what I mean? That your candle, no matter how small, is bright enough to get somebody out of darkness. And for me, I'm hoping that, whatever is written on my tombstone is, he brought me out of darkness. He brought me out of darkness, whatever darkness it might have been. That for me would be incredibly important.
I love that. And the last question is, if you had a superpower, what would it be?
Oh man, I'm a big. I say I love Superman, man.
You
Trust me,
do?
Man of Steel all the way. I do. I'm
Nice.
telling you for real. I love the movies as well. Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, good. I
Um,
love that.
but like, I'd really love to fly, to be honest. But I think I don't know if I could be a superhero. I'm a little torn. I'm a little torn. Superman. I really like Superman, but I
Yeah.
think while I like Superman, if I could be like Batman, because I mean, I'd like to be Batman with Superman's powers, if you know what I mean. Because Batman has contingency plans. He knows how to execute. He doesn't have the whole. He's not. It's not black or white.
He's a businessman.
Exactly. He's a businessman. So So I mean, it would be nice to make him invulnerable and fly too. But yes, I think that'd be Batman and Superman.
I love it. I love it. Steve, is there anything you want to end off telling our audience?
I just want to say thank you, Jeff. You and I just caught up on Instagram, and you just invited me, and that was so gracious of you. I mean, you didn't know me from Adam. You took a chance and you invited me to this podcast, and you shared a bit of yourself with me, and vice versa. I mean, I got to know about your kids. I got to know about your fitness. Totally proud of the work you're doing, and I just want to say thank you, man. I don't know if you get many people who say thank you to you, because again, people like you go about doing good not because of what you're going to get out of it. It's just because of who you are. And sometimes that can be taken for granted because people just expect things from you. And people like you usually never get anything in return. But I want to say thank you for the opportunity, for the conversation, for the laughs, for even teaching me a bit better about family and my fitness. Once this podcast is done, I'm going to create some, very good memories with my daughter and my wife. But I want to say thank you, Jeff. I do appreciate it.
One thing I'm gonna finish off with, and first off, thank you for saying that. It was very kind. When we talk about memories, one thing where I started dipping into when we never finished was we went off topic because we had such a great conversation today was photos. Remember I talked about photos?
Yes, I remember you talked about that.
Do you develop photos?
No.
Start doing that. No, you're going to learn one more thing from me today.
Tell me.
Develop photos. Because photos now, everybody says, oh, they're on the cloud. I got them on my phone. When's the last time you sat with your family and flipped through your phone photos? Never. Me and my wife develop all our photos from every trip, every moment. We develop the photos and we put them in albums. And it's nothing more special than going up on a Sunday afternoon or whatever. And my kids are on the floor going through photos and laughing and joking and saying, oh, I remember that. There's nothing like the texture, the smell, the paper of a photo. I'll give you another example. Like I was telling somebody about this the other day on a podcast. My son, we went to see my dad, and we drove down to Toronto, and we're and my dad and my son. So he started talking to his my son started talking to his grandfather, and he started talking about war. And then when my dad was in war, in the military. And my grandfather and my dad was like, okay, let me go upstairs. And he went and grabbed these old albums with these black and white photos in. And my son was so memorized because you could talk these memories, right? But visually seeing them is a different world. So now it's the VNA, like you now have the visual and being able to visually see it. My son was like, Tiago was, oh, Dad, I mean, Grandpa, could I have one? And he took a photo and now he has it hung in his room. And it was just proudness. And it's something special, that smell, that feel, going through and sitting down and going through these photos. So develop photos.
I'm going to do that. That is a beautiful thought. And you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. Because, like you said,
you'll pass that down to generations. Your daughter one day will keep those photos and be able to show her kids. And it's just generation after generation of having those photos that, you know what, one day when we're not here, your daughter, my kids could show their kids, say, hey, this is what your grandpa looked like, or this is their great grand. It's being able to pass those images down. And on a phone, you lose your phone. Stuff happens. Data goes. Develop your photos.
Whoa. That's deep. That's deep. That is deep.
I love it, brother. I love it.
This is
on our show notes. I'm going to put all the information, how to get a hold of Steve, how to follow him on social media. He's got a great following, great personality. Obviously, anybody that's spent the last hour listening to this podcast, hour and 15 minutes listening to the podcast, will know that Steve's a great individual, is helping a lot of people. And I love the bare fact that he's actually going to grassroots, helping startups and helping smaller companies also grow and be able to provide to their family. So his impact is not only on one person, it's on families and families. So it's spreading to thousands and thousands. So that's pretty special. And obviously he's a special father, and I'm blessed that we met, and thank you so much. And I hope this is a connection. We continue on a friendship from here on, and one day you could come visit us in Canada, and I could take you around. Thank you so much, brother. Thank you. Have a one day.
You too.
That's a wrap for today. I want to thank our guest, Steve Harris, for taking time out of his busy schedule to be a guest on the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. Amazing conversation. If you guys enjoy this as much as I did, please tell your friends, tell your family, spread the word. We're trying to build something special here. If you could, leave a review. 5 stars would be absolutely amazing. We love spending our time reading the reviews. Until next week, guys, keep moving forward.